She was certain her plan was perfect, a clean cut that would leave her with everything she deserved. But what she didn't know was that the fortune she was about to steal was already hers, and the man she was about to destroy was the only one who truly saw her worth. The house was silent, but it was the kind of silence that hummed with the electricity of expensive things. Celeste stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over a city that glittered like a pile of scattered diamonds. Their penthouse was the envy of everyone they knew, a monument to her husband's success. His name was Rhys, and to the world, he was a genius, a man who had built a tech empire from the ground up. To Celeste, he was becoming a ghost in his own home, a man she saw more often on magazine covers than across the dinner table. She smoothed the silk of her robe, the fabric cool against her skin. It was a gift from him, from a trip to Milan she hadn't been invited on. Too much work, he had said, his voice apologetic but distant over the phone. Everything in this house was a gift from him. The abstract painting in the hall, the crystal glasses in the cabinet, the very air she breathed, conditioned to a perfect 72 degrees. But they didn't feel like gifts anymore. They felt like payments. Payments for her time, for her patience, for her role as Mrs. Rhys Covington, the beautiful, supportive wife. But support was a two-way street, and Celeste felt like she was standing alone on a dead-end road. She had been there from the beginning, back when their office was a garage and their dinners were cheap takeout eaten on cardboard boxes. She had brainstormed with him, proofread his proposals, and calmed him down when investors pulled out. His dream had been their dream. But somewhere along the way, it had become his alone. The we had faded into he. A quiet chime announced his arrival. Rhys walked in, shrugging off his tailored coat. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his latest victory, a $10 billion merger that would make him a legend in the industry. He smiled when he saw her, a weary but genuine smile that used to make her heart skip a beat. Now, it just felt like a reflex. "Hey you," he said, walking over to kiss her cheek. His lips were cool. "Long day. It's done then?" Celeste asked, her voice carefully neutral. "It's done," he confirmed, running a hand through his dark hair. "We just signed the last of it. The company is ours. Well, mostly ours. The deal is massive, Celeste. Life-changing." He looked around the penthouse, at the glittering city beyond. "This is just the beginning." Celeste's heart went cold. "The company is ours," she repeated softly. "Rhys, who are you kidding? It's your company. Your name on the door. Your face on the news." She wasn't trying to start a fight, not yet. She was just testing the waters, seeing if he would notice the hurt in her voice. He didn't. He was too caught up in his own world. "It's our life, Celeste. Everything I do for us." He gestured around the room. "Is this not enough? We have everything." Everything. The word echoed in the vast, empty space between them. They had everything money could buy, but they had lost something priceless along the way. They had lost the us they started with. Celeste looked at him, at this man she had loved so fiercely, and felt a chasm opening up between them. He saw her as an accessory to his success, a beautiful piece of art to hang in his perfect home. He didn't see the woman who had sacrificed her own ambitions for his. He didn't see the partner who deserved a seat at the table, not just a complimentary ticket to the gala. That night, as Rhys slept the sound sleep of a conqueror, Celeste lay awake, the plan forming in her mind like a shard of ice. He thought she was just a pretty wife. He had no idea she was just as strategic as he was. If he wouldn't give her what she was owed, she would take it. And she knew exactly how. Their prenup was ironclad, except for one clause, infidelity. If he cheated, she got a much, much larger piece of the pie. His entire stake in the new merger, in fact. It was a clause he had insisted on, a gesture to prove his loyalty. The irony was almost beautiful. He had handed her the weapon she would use to destroy him. The plan needed a pawn, someone believable but disposable. Celeste found her in a struggling actors database online. Her name was Sienna, a bright-eyed girl with a mountain of student debt and a desperate hunger for a big break. She was pretty, but not in the intimidating old money way Celeste was. She was approachable, the kind of girl a man like Reese might actually talk to in a bar if he was feeling lonely. Celeste met her at a quiet, discreet cafe far from her own neighborhood. Sienna was nervous, twisting a paper napkin in her hands. "I don't understand," Sienna said, her voice barely a whisper. "You want to pay me, to pretend to have an affair with your husband?" Celeste stirred her tea, her movements slow and deliberate. "Not an affair. Just the appearance of one. A few photos, a few text messages. Enough to create a convincing story. You will be well compensated for your time and your discretion. Enough to pay off your debts and start fresh, somewhere far away from here." Celeste slid an envelope across the table. Sienna hesitantly opened it. Her eyes widened as she saw the stacks of cash inside. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. "Why?" Sienna asked, her eyes searching Celeste's face for an answer. "Why would you do this?" Celeste leaned forward, her voice a low, convincing murmur. "My husband. He's not the man the world thinks he is. He's controlling. He's dismissive. He's trapped me in a golden cage, and the only way out is to prove he's unfaithful. This is not about revenge, Sienna. This is about freedom." It was a lie, but it was a beautiful one. Celeste could see the sympathy in Sienna's eyes. Every woman understood the feeling of being trapped. Over the next few weeks, Celeste became a director, and Sienna was her star actress. She coached her on what to wear, how to talk, how to look at Reese with a mixture of admiration and longing. She studied Reese's calendar, finding the perfect opportunity. It was a business trip to Chicago. He would be staying at the Four Seasons, attending a series of meetings. Celeste booked Sienna a room in the same hotel. She hired a private investigator, a former cop with no morals and a love for cash, to be ready. The night of the planned encounter, Celeste sat in her silent penthouse, her phone in her hand. She had sent Reese a text message an hour earlier. "Thinking of you. I miss you." He had replied almost instantly. "Miss you too. Can't wait to be home. This trip is a killer." A pang of something, guilt, doubt, pricked at Celeste's heart, but she pushed it down. This was a business transaction. Emotions were a liability. She texted Sienna, "He's in the hotel bar. He always has a final drink there before heading up to his room. Remember what I told you. Make it look natural." Sienna's reply came a minute later. "I'm scared, Celeste." Celeste's fingers flew across the screen. "You are an actress. This is your role. $100,000 is waiting for you when this is over. Don't mess it up." The private investigator was in position. He was a professional, skilled at capturing moments that looked like something they weren't. The plan was simple. Sienna would accidentally spill a drink on Reese. In the ensuing apology, she would touch his arm, laugh at his jokes, lean in close to hear him over the noise of the bar. The PI would capture it all. The angle of the photos would do the rest. A friendly touch would look like a caress. A shared laugh would look like an intimate secret. A goodbye hug, which Sienna was instructed to initiate, would be framed to look like a passionate embrace. It was a lie constructed from tiny, harmless truths. And it was brilliant. An hour later, Celeste's phone buzzed. It was an email from the investigator. Subject: Package delivered. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she opened it. There they were. A series of photos, perfectly staged, perfectly damning. Reese and Sienna, leaning close together. A shot of her hand on his forearm, his head tilted towards hers. And the final one, the masterpiece, a hug near the elevators, shot from behind Sienna so all you could see was Reese's face, his eyes closed as if in bliss. In reality, He was probably just exhausted. But the picture told a different story. Celeste looked at the images, a cold sense of triumph washing over her. She had done it. She had her evidence. The man who had made her feel invisible was about to have his whole world exposed, and she would be the one holding the camera. Reese came home 2 days later, carrying a small gift-wrapped box. He found Celeste in the living room, staring out the window, the same way he'd found her when he left. He smiled, holding out the box. "I brought you something," he said. "It's a vintage locket I found in this little antique shop. I thought it was beautiful. Like you." Celeste took the box but didn't open it. Her hands were cold. "We need to talk, Reese." The smile on his face faltered. "Okay," he said slowly, sitting on the sofa opposite her. "Is everything all right? You seem distant." "I know where you were on Tuesday night," she said, her voice flat and empty of emotion. Reese frowned, confused. "I was in Chicago. At the hotel bar. I told you I had that final meeting with the—" "Stop lying," she cut him off. She slid a large manila envelope onto the coffee table between them. "Just stop." He looked at the envelope, then back at her, a deep hurt dawning in his eyes. "Lying? Celeste, what is this?" He reached for the envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled out the glossy 8x10 photos. He stared at the first one, of him and Sienna at the bar. His brow furrowed. "This is— I don't even know who that is. A woman spilled her drink on me. I bought her a new one. We talked for a few minutes. That's all it was. And this." Celeste's voice was sharp as glass as she pointed to the next photo, the one of Sienna's hand on his arm. "And this one. The hug by the elevators." Reese looked at the photos, his face a mask of disbelief. "This is insane," he whispered, shaking his head. "These pictures, they're twisted. This isn't what happened. Celeste, you have to believe me." He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. "This is not what it looks like. I would never ever do that to you. To us." This was the moment Celeste had rehearsed in her mind 100 times. This was where she had to be the victim. She had to break. She let out a choked sob, a sound she had practiced in front of her bathroom mirror. "How could you?" she whispered, tears she had summoned filling her eyes. "After everything. All the years I've stood by you, supported you. Was I not enough? Was all of this," she gestured around the luxurious penthouse, "not enough for you?" "Enough? Celeste, you are my everything," he said, his voice cracking. He stood up, trying to move toward her, but she flinched back as if his touch would burn her. "Please," he begged. "Don't do this. Don't let this misunderstanding, this lie destroy us. We can talk about this. I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," she finally yelled, the feigned emotion now mixing with years of real buried resentment. "I see it right here, in black and white. You with her. While I was here, alone, waiting for you. You think I don't know how these things work? The lonely businessman on a trip." "That's not me," he insisted, his voice rising in desperation. "That has never been me. How can you look at me, after 12 years together, and believe I am capable of this?" It was a good question. The old Celeste, the one who loved him, would never have believed it. But this new Celeste, the one forged in loneliness and resentment, found it easy. She had to. Her entire future depended on it. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, final whisper. "I want a divorce." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and destructive. Reese stared at her, his face pale with shock. All the fight went out of him, replaced by a profound, hollow sadness. He wasn't looking at a collection of misleading photos anymore. He was looking at his wife, a woman who was willing to believe the very worst of him without a second thought. The betrayal wasn't in the pictures. The real betrayal was in her eyes. He sank back onto the sofa, the photos slipping from his numb fingers and scattering across the floor. He had built an empire, conquered boardrooms, and negotiated billion-dollar deals. But in his own home, with the woman he loved, he had just lost everything that mattered. Have you ever been so convinced of your own side of the story that you refused to see the truth, even when it was right in front of you? What happens when the reality you've built for yourself turns out to be a carefully constructed lie? The days that followed were a blur of cold silence and lawyers. Celeste moved into one of the guest suites, creating a physical distance that matched the emotional one. She hired the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city, a shark named Marcus Thorne who specialized in high-asset separations. Their first meeting took place in a sterile, intimidating office overlooking the financial district. "The infidelity clause is our key," Thorne said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on their prenup. "It's beautifully written. In the event of proven infidelity, all assets acquired during the marriage, including his shares from the recent merger, are subject to a 75-25 split in your favor. Given his new valuation, you're looking at a settlement in the billions." "He denies it," Celeste said, her voice steady. She had to play the part of the grieving wife, even here. "He says the pictures are not what they seem." Thorne smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "It doesn't matter what he says. It matters what a judge sees. And these pictures, combined with your testimony, they tell a very compelling story. We'll subpoena his phone records, his credit card statements. We'll find a thread to pull. Even if he was careful, there's always a thread." Meanwhile, Reese was in his own personal hell. His lawyer, a calm, older man named David, was more pragmatic. "Reese, these photos are a problem," David said, spreading them across his mahogany desk. "A good lawyer can make these look like anything they want. In family court, perception is often reality." "But it's a lie, David." Reese insisted, pacing the office. "I spent 10 minutes with this woman. I don't even know her name. It was nothing. Celeste knows me. She knows I wouldn't do this." "Does she?" David asked gently. "From what you've told me, things have been strained for a while. Is it possible she wants to believe it?" The question hit Reese harder than any accusation. He stopped pacing and sank into a chair. Had he been that blind? He'd been so focused on building a future for them that he'd neglected the present. He'd seen the distance in her eyes but had dismissed it as stress or fatigue. He thought showering her with gifts, with a beautiful life, was a way of showing his love. Now he saw it for what it was, a poor substitute for his time, for his presence. He had given her a palace, but made her feel like a prisoner. But even so, this leap, from feeling neglected to orchestrating a divorce based on a lie, it didn't add up. The first legal letters were exchanged. Celeste's team demanded full financial disclosure, hinting at the damning evidence they possessed. Reese's team responded with his sworn testimony, a detailed account of his uneventful evening in Chicago. But his words felt weak against the power of the photographs. The narrative was already set. A powerful, wealthy husband caught in a classic cliché. Reese tried to talk to Celeste one last time. He found her in the kitchen, directing movers who were packing up her personal belongings into boxes. "Celeste, please," he began, his voice raw. "Don't do this. Let's go to counseling. Let's work on us. I know I've been distant. I've been buried in work. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. But this is not the answer." She turned to him, her face an unreadable mask. "The answer to what, Reese? The answer to my loneliness? The answer to being a footnote in your life story? The only answer I see is the one in those photos." "They're a lie," he exclaimed, his frustration boiling over. "And I think deep down you know it. Why are you choosing to believe a lie?" "Maybe," she said, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper, "it's just easier than believing in you anymore." She turned her back on him and said to a mover, "Be careful with that one. It's fragile." That was the moment Reese understood. She wasn't a woman in pain, seeking the truth. She was a woman on a mission, and the truth didn't matter. Something else was driving her, something cold and calculated that he couldn't yet see. The fight wasn't about infidelity. It was about something else entirely. He walked away, the sound of packing tape sealing boxes echoing behind him like the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. The pain in his chest was immense, but underneath it, a new feeling began to stir: suspicion. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was an attack. And he had no idea who was behind it, or why. He looked at the woman he married, the woman directing the disassembly of their life together, and for the first time, he felt like he was looking at a stranger. The divorce became a machine, grinding forward with brutal efficiency. Celeste's legal team filed their petition, citing irreconcilable differences, and attaching the investigators' photos as part of a sealed affidavit. The word billions was whispered in legal circles. The story was too juicy to stay private. Anonymous sources began leaking details to gossip columns. Tech titan Reese Covington's marriage crumbles amid cheating scandal. His face was splashed across websites, next to a blurred-out image of Sienna. The narrative Celeste had crafted was now public opinion. Reese felt the walls closing in. The board of his newly merged company called an emergency meeting. They were worried about the scandal, about the stability of his leadership. "Reese, we support you," the chairman said, his face grim. "But the optics on this are terrible. A messy divorce, accusations of infidelity. It makes our investors nervous." Reese sat at the head of the table he had built, in a room filled with people who owed their careers to him, and felt utterly alone. "It's all a lie," he said, his voice tired. "I am being set up." "Then fight it," one of the board members urged. "Countess Sue. Clear your name." "Fight my own wife?" Reese asked, a hollow laugh escaping his lips. "And drag us both through the mud for months, maybe years? The company will suffer. Our stock will plummet. What's the win in that?" He looked around the room. He could see the truth in their eyes. They didn't care about his marriage. They cared about their bottom line. The scandal was a threat to the fortune he had just created. That evening, he sat in his lawyer's office, the weight of the world on his shoulders. David laid out the options. "We can fight this, Reese. It will be ugly, public, and expensive. It could take years. Or, we can settle. Her team is pushing for the full amount based on the infidelity clause. It would mean signing over your entire personal stake from the merger." "She wants the money," Reese said, not as a question, but as a statement. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was never about a broken heart. It was a heist. "She framed me to take the money." "It's a strong accusation," David said carefully. "And without proof, it's just a theory. Right now, she has pictures, and you have a story. In court, pictures often win." Reese stared out the window at the city lights. He thought of the years of work, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices. He thought of Celeste, the woman who had stood by his side, now poised to take it all away with a handful of manipulated photos. He could fight. He could drag her name, and his own, through a public spectacle of accusations and denials. He could spend years and millions of dollars to prove his innocence, all while his company, his life's work, bled out from the bad press. Or he could let it go. A profound weariness settled over him. He was tired of fighting. He was tired of the lies. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was the betrayal. The woman he had planned to spend his life with had orchestrated his downfall. What was the point of winning a war against her? The person he was fighting for, the us he believed in, was already dead. "Give it to her," Reese said, his voice quiet but firm. David's head snapped up. "Reese, you can't be serious. This is your entire future. Billions of dollars." "It's just money," David, Reese said, a strange sense of calm washing over him. The anger and hurt were still there, but they were now coated in a layer of resigned clarity. She wants the money more than she ever wanted me. Let her have it. Let her have it all. I want this to be over. The next day, the lawyers met. Celeste's team was stunned. They had expected a war. Instead, they got a surrender. Reese agreed to their terms. He would not contest the infidelity claim. He would sign over his personal shares from the merger, a fortune so vast it was hard to comprehend. All he asked for in return was a clean break. A non-disclosure agreement to keep the details of the settlement private. He didn't want to clear his name. He just wanted to be free. Celeste received the news from her lawyer, Thorne. He's not fighting, Thorne said, a hint of disbelief in his own voice. He's giving you everything. Celeste stood in her half-empty penthouse, the movers' boxes stacked around her like a fortress. She had won. It was a total victory, faster and cleaner than she had ever imagined. She should have been ecstatic. She should have been celebrating. But as she hung up the phone, an unnerving silence filled the room. She had the fortune. She had her freedom. But as she looked at the empty space where Reese's favorite armchair used to be, a cold, hollow feeling began to spread through her chest. She had won, but she had never felt more alone. Celeste's new life began with the stroke of a pen. The numbers that appeared in her bank account had so many zeros they looked like a mistake. She was, by any measure, one of the wealthiest women in the world. She bought a new, even more extravagant penthouse overlooking Central Park. She filled it with art from famous painters and furniture designed by Italian masters. She went on shopping sprees that would have funded a small country for a year. She was free. She was powerful. She was miserable. The victory felt hollow, the money cold. The silence in her new home was louder than the silence in the old one. There were no ghosts of shared memories here, just the sterile echo of her own footsteps on marble floors. Her friends, the ones who had envied her life with Reese, now treated her with a strange mixture of awe and suspicion. They drank her expensive champagne and complimented her new apartment, but their eyes held a question she couldn't answer. Was it worth it? She tried to convince herself it was. She would look at her bank statement, at the staggering number, and tell herself, this is security. This is independence. But the number didn't keep her warm at night. She started dating, trying to fill the void Reese had left. She went out with handsome, powerful men, but they all felt like pale imitations. They were interested in her fortune, not her. They saw the number in her bank account before they saw the woman sitting across from them. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to be loved for your money. It was a bitter, lonely feeling. Meanwhile, Reese was starting over. He had lost his fortune, but he had kept his company. He had given up his personal shares from the merger, but his original stake, the company he had built from nothing, was still his. It was diminished, and he was no longer a billionaire, but he wasn't broken. He moved out of the city, into a small, rented house by the coast. He sold his expensive cars and traded his tailored suits for simple jeans and sweaters. He had lost billions of dollars, but he felt lighter. The anger and betrayal hadn't vanished, but they no longer consumed him. The quiet life gave him time to think. The speed at which Celeste's plan had worked, his own quick surrender, it all felt too neat. One night, unable to sleep, he sat down at his simple kitchen table with a laptop. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was looking for understanding. How had she done it? He started with the one thing he knew, the woman in the photos. He didn't know her name, but he remembered the brief conversation. She'd mentioned being an actress, struggling to find work. It was a small detail, but it was a start. He began searching online databases for acting schools and agencies in his city. It was a needle in a haystack. But he had nothing but time. Days turned into weeks. He methodically went through websites, looking at headshots. Then, he found her. Her name was Sienna Miller. Her profile listed her as a theater major with a few minor commercial credits. There was a contact email for her agent. Reese stared at the picture. The smiling, hopeful girl in the photo looked nothing like the woman he imagined had helped destroy his life. He also started looking at his old financial records from the months leading up to the divorce. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just a loose thread. And then he found one. A wire transfer from a personal savings account Celeste kept, one he barely knew existed. It was for $50,000, sent 2 weeks before his Chicago trip. The recipient was a holding company with a generic name. It was probably nothing. A payment for art or furniture. But it was an anomaly. On a hunch, he did a business search on the holding company. The registration address was the same as the acting agency that represented Sienna Miller. Reese leaned back in his chair, the pieces clicking into place. Celeste hadn't just suspected him. She had manufactured the entire event. She had hired the girl. It was a premeditated, cold-blooded plan. The knowledge didn't bring him the anger he expected. Instead, it brought a strange sense of pity. What kind of desperation, what kind of emptiness, would drive a person to do something so calculated to someone they had once loved? He now had proof. He could go to the authorities. He could sue her for fraud, take back the money, and ruin her. But what would that accomplish? It wouldn't mend his broken heart. It wouldn't bring back the woman he had lost. He closed his laptop. He knew the truth. For now, that was enough. Do you believe people truly change, or do they just get better at hiding who they are? If you discovered a deep betrayal, would your first instinct be revenge, or would you seek to understand why it happened? Months passed. Reese focused on his work, not with the obsessive drive he once had, but with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't trying to rebuild his fortune. He was trying to rebuild himself. The company thrived under his quieter, more focused leadership. He promoted people from within, fostered a culture of collaboration, and found joy in the creation process again, not just the financial reward. But the question of why still lingered. He had the how, but the why eluded him. Why the elaborate scheme? Why not just ask for a divorce? Why the need to destroy his reputation? One afternoon, he found himself driving back into the city. He didn't have a plan, but he ended up in the theater district. He found the address for Sienna's acting agency and waited. A few hours later, he saw her. She was leaving the building, looking defeated. "Sienna," he said, stepping out of his car. She froze, her eyes wide with panic. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, already on the defensive. "I'm not here to hurt you," Reese said, his voice calm and gentle. "I'm not angry. I just want to understand." He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see a villain. He saw a scared young woman who had made a terrible mistake. "She paid you, didn't she? Celeste. She hired you to be in those photos." Tears welled up in Sienna's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his voice soft. "The money," she whispered, shamefaced. "I had so much debt. My mom is sick." "Celeste." She made it sound like she was the victim. "Like you were this monster, and she was just trying to escape. I thought I was helping her." The words came tumbling out, a confession she had clearly been holding in for months. "I feel so guilty. I see your face in the news, and I feel sick. The money she gave me. I haven't touched most of it. It feels dirty." Reese listened, and a heavy weight lifted from his chest. He wasn't a monster in a stranger's eyes. He was just a man caught in the crossfire of someone else's pain. "Thank you for telling me the truth," he said simply. As he was about to turn away, a thought struck him. It was a long shot, but he had to ask. "My wife," he began, "she felt I didn't see her, that I didn't appreciate her role in the company's success. She was there from the beginning. Did she ever mention that to you?" Sienna thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "She said you took all the credit." That you were about to close this huge merger and write her out of the story completely. She said you thought she was just a pretty wife, and not a partner. The words hit Reese like a physical blow. Write her out of the story? He had been planning the exact opposite. That merger wasn't just about making money. It was about securing the company's future so he could finally step back. He had been working with his lawyers for months on a secret plan, his grand surprise for their 12th anniversary, which was just a month after the divorce. He drove straight to the bank and opened his personal safe deposit box, a box Celeste didn't know existed. There, at the bottom, was a thick leather-bound folder. He pulled it out, his hands shaking. Inside was a letter, written on his personal stationery, and a stack of legal documents. He unfolded the letter. "My dearest Celeste," it began. "For 12 years, you have been my partner, my rock, and my inspiration. I know these last few years I have been distant, lost in the world of business. I have made you feel like a spectator in our own life, and for that, I am endlessly sorry. I've been working on this merger not just for the money, but for the freedom it would give us. More importantly, the freedom it would give me to finally do what I should have done years ago. You were there in the garage. You were there for every failure and every victory. This company is as much yours as it is mine. The enclosed documents are a transfer of leadership. I am stepping down as CEO. The board has already agreed. The position is yours. You are the most brilliant, strategic person I know, and it's time the world saw what I've always seen. This company isn't my legacy, my love. It was always meant to be ours." He stared at the letter, at the signed, notarized documents that would have made Celeste the CEO of the multi-billion-dollar corporation. This was the unexpected. This was the truth. He had been building her a throne, and she, believing he was building a wall, had burned the entire kingdom down to steal a handful of ashes. The fortune she had framed him for, the power she had craved, was the very thing he had been trying to give her all along. The betrayal was no longer just about a lie. It was about a catastrophic, heartbreaking misunderstanding that had cost them everything. Armed with the truth, Reese felt a cold, quiet resolve. This was no longer about money or revenge. It was about closure. He called Celeste. His number was blocked, so he called from his lawyer's office. She answered, her voice sharp and impatient. "Who is this?" "It's Reese." Silence. He could hear her sharp intake of breath. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her tone guarded. "I need to see you," he said. "It's important. It's not about the money. I just need to show you something. After that, I promise, you will never hear from me again." Curiosity, or perhaps a flicker of old connection, won out. She agreed to meet him at the old penthouse, the one they had shared, which was still sitting empty, unsold. When he arrived, she was already there, standing in the vast, unfurnished living room. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She looked impeccable, dressed in a designer suit, but her eyes were shadowed with weariness. "What is this, Reese?" she asked, her arms crossed. "Have you come to beg for your money back?" He didn't answer. He simply walked to the center of the room and placed the leather-bound folder on the floor. "I know how you did it," he said calmly. "I know about Sienna. I know you hired her. I know you paid her. I know you staged the entire thing." Celeste's face went pale. The mask of composure cracked. "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "I can," he said. "Sienna told me everything. I have bank records. It's all there. I could take this to the police. I could sue you for fraud. I could take back every last cent." She stared at him, a cornered animal. "So that's it? You're here to threaten me? To ruin me?" "No," Reese said, and his voice was filled with a sadness so profound it seemed to suck the air out of the room. "I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here to show you what you ruined." He knelt and opened the folder, taking out the letter he had written. "This is for you," he said, holding it out to her. She hesitated, then snatched it from his hand. She read the first line, then the second. Her eyes scanned the page, faster and faster. Her hands began to shake. The color drained from her face, replaced by a ghastly, chalky white. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth as a strangled sound escaped her throat. She looked from the letter to the legal documents, the ones that would have made her CEO, then back to his face. You were going to give it to me," she whispered, her voice filled with horrified disbelief. "All of it." "It was your anniversary gift," he said softly. "I know I wasn't good at saying it, Celeste. I thought I could show you. I thought this grand gesture. I thought it would finally make you see how much I valued you. That you weren't just my wife, you were my partner. You were always my partner." The truth, in its brutal, devastating simplicity, shattered her. Every justification she had built, every story she had told herself about being a victim, about being unseen and unappreciated, crumbled into dust. The man she had painted as a villain, the man she had so clinically and cruelly betrayed, had been crafting the ultimate tribute to her. The fortune she had stolen was a pale imitation of the kingdom he had been about to hand her freely, a kingdom that came with his love, his respect, and his unwavering belief in her. Tears streamed down her face, not the calculated tears of a performer, but the raw, scalding tears of genuine heartbreak and regret. "No," she sobbed, shaking her head as if she could deny the reality in front of her. "No, no." She sank to the floor, the letter clutched in her hand, her body racked with a grief so immense it was terrifying. She had not only destroyed him, she had destroyed her own dream. She had destroyed the one person who saw her as she had always longed to be seen. Rhys watched her for a moment, the woman he once loved, now a stranger broken by the weight of her own choices. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a vast, empty sorrow for the love they had lost and the beautiful future that would now never be. He turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the truth in the empty room. The legal and financial fallout was swift and catastrophic for Celeste. Armed with Sienna's sworn affidavit and the evidence of the wire transfers, Rhys's lawyers filed a motion to nullify the divorce settlement on the grounds of fraud. The court froze all of Celeste's assets. The billions she had won were now trapped in a legal nightmare of her own making. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of criminal charges, Celeste had no choice but to surrender. The settlement was voided. The money, every last dollar, was returned. She lost everything. The penthouse in New York, the art, the cars, the clothes. Her name, once associated with wealth and high society, was now just Celeste Hayes, a name that meant nothing to anyone. She was a pariah, left with nothing but the crushing weight of her regret. The friends who had flocked to her parties disappeared. The men who had pursued her wanted nothing to do with her. Rhys did not press criminal charges. That was his one act of mercy. He had taken back what was his, and his name was cleared, but he found no joy in her complete destruction. He simply wanted it to be over. He sold the old penthouse and severed the last remaining ties to their shared life. He continued to live quietly, finding a new, more peaceful rhythm. He didn't date. He wasn't ready. The wound was deep, and he knew it would take a long time to heal. He poured his energy into his company and into rediscovering himself, not as a billionaire titan, but just as Rhys. A year later, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Rhys was walking through a quiet neighborhood he rarely visited. He was on his way to a meeting, but he was early, so he decided to stop for a coffee. As he stood outside a small, unassuming cafe, his eyes were drawn to a woman behind the counter. She was wiping down the espresso machine, her movements tired but focused. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain black apron. It was Celeste. She looked different. The expensive, polished veneer was gone. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were replaced by a simple uniform. But for the first time in years, she looked real. The hardness in her eyes had been replaced by a quiet humility. She looked up, sensing his gaze, and their eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. A jolt went through both of them. There was no anger in his eyes, and no defiance in hers. There was only a shared, silent acknowledgement of the lifetime of pain and loss that stood between them. A universe of what-ifs and if-onlys. Her face, for just a second, crumpled with a familiar shame and regret. She looked down, breaking the eye contact, and continued to wipe the counter, her hands trembling slightly. Rhys stood there for a long moment, the rain falling around him. He could have gone in. He could have said something. But what was there left to say? Forgiveness was a complicated thing. Maybe he had forgiven her, but he could never forget. The trust, the love, the future they were supposed to have, it was all gone, turned to dust by a single catastrophic choice. He pulled up the collar of his coat and walked away, not looking back. He was leaving her not to her punishment, but to her new beginning. And he was walking toward his own. Celeste had chased a fortune, believing it would bring her power and freedom. In the end, she had lost it all and found herself working in a cafe, serving coffee to strangers. Rhys had lost the same fortune, but in doing so, he had found something far more valuable, himself. He had learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in integrity, in trust, and in the peace that comes from knowing you are true to your own heart. Celeste had to lose everything to learn that lesson. He had to lose her. When all is said and done, what do you think is harder to live with? The pain of being betrayed, or the regret of being the one who betrayed? Is true forgiveness about letting someone back into your life, or is it about finding peace and letting them go for good? Kindly share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you.